Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Zahir, and today we'll be talking about OpenAI's Agent SDK. Before we talk about the use case and the example that I want to show you where I have used OpenAI SDKs to essentially build a multi-agent orchestrator or a multi-agent implementation, I want to essentially run the agent first, and then let's see how that works, right? All right. So the name of the agent is let's call it a chat agent. It's called Restaurant Customer Support Chat, and it's working right now. It can take instructions through the input field. So what I'm going to ask is what is the status of order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's see what it does. There is the response. Your order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is being prepared and will be delivered in 20 minutes. Great. I also want to ask something completely unrelated with orders, but just I want to know the time that when the restaurant is open. So when are you guys open? Random, natural language, completely, unstructured here. So the response is we are open from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day. Great. And what I want to do is I want to book a table for 2 at 2 p.m. today. Your reservation request has been received. Please check your email for confirmation. All right, awesome. You see that I gave it 3 completely unrelated instructions or tasks, right? One is I basically asked for the status of an order that I have placed. The order number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, assuming that I remember the order number. And it gave an appropriate response. We'll see how it is generating the response in a bit. The second question I asked is, we are open from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day. I asked it, when are you guys open? It gave an appropriate response. And what I did next was basically, tried reserving a seat or a table for 2 p.m. At 2 p.m. And it essentially did that. It understood the task and it was able to execute them. So with that said, let's actually look at the goal for today's video. The goal of this particular video is to essentially build a restaurant customer support agent. This particular agent should answer queries on orders, should also answer queries about FAQ, frequently asked questions. It should be able to take customer complaints, and it should also, do reservations for the restaurant. And all of this in a completely automated fashion. There is no human involved in the loop here. We could probably add an agent that will probably, involve or bring a human in the loop. But for now, let's assume that all of these tasks are well defined and can be managed through LLMs. We'll be using the OpenAI Agent SDK to build this multi-agent implementation. Here is a simple illustration of what the agent does. There is an interface agent or a triage agent. That's what OpenAI calls it. It essentially takes a query from the user, and depending on the type of task, it'll hand the task to a relevant agent. So for example, if I have a query about order, the task will be handed off to the order agent, and the order agent will essentially invoke the relevant tool, process that information, and return the response back to the triage agent. And the triage agent essentially returns the response back to the user on the UI, or however the user is essentially interacting with the agent here. Okay, it's a very simple implementation. This is also going to be part 1 of the OpenAI Agent SDK tutorial. I'll also have part 2 created with far more complexities. All right. So let's actually quickly look at what is the OpenAI Agent SDK. The OpenAI Agent SDK is a lightweight yet powerful framework for building multi-agent workflows. If you remember, last year OpenAI had released something called as OpenAI Swarm, which is again a multi-agent orchestration framework. And that was not production ready. They were calling it experimental, but they have taken the best parts from that and have created this production ready OpenAI Agents SDK. This is very powerful. I've run some experiments already. I believe that this is probably one of the easiest to implement, as well as one of the uh, most robust implementation of a multi-agent orchestrator. And you'll see it why in a bit. Now, what are the core concepts here? The core concepts here are essentially uh, agents. You need to know what the agent here is. You need to know what what the handoff means in the context of OpenAI agents. Guardrails, most importantly, I think this is one of the most powerful features that we have seen, apart from what we had seen in OpenAI's, some of the features that we had seen in OpenAI Swarm. And tracing, will not cover tracing in this particular part one tutorial. We'll also not cover guardrails. We'll focus on agents and handoffs. Obviously, the tools as well. Now, what are agents? Agents essentially serve as the fundamental building blocks of your application, right? Each agent is powered by a large language model and is configured with specific instructions and tools. The instruction essentially is, you can call it a prompt, and the tool essentially is maybe a method or a class, or you're calling an API, you're calling a database, or you're calling a database to write data into it. Could be anything. Now, the handoff here is basically the handoff allows agents to delegate tasks to other agents. You could have specialized agents. In this case, we have built super specialized agents for orders, for FAQs, to taking complaints and reservation agent. You could build a simple triage agent that, depending on the user query, will simply hand off the task or control to a relevant specialized agent. That's all there is to that particular concept. There are a lot of details that we need to double click on, but we'll save that for a future tutorial. The goal here is very simple. We'll do a simple implementation of a multi-agent orchestration, right? Guardrails, again, guardrails is a very important concept, probably one of the best best feature that has been introduced in OpenAI SDK, OpenAI Agent SDK. The guardrails operate concurrently with your agents, providing checks and validations for your user inputs, right? This ensures that interactions with your application adhere to predefined criteria and maintain security and usability standards. All right. We will not be covering guardrails in this particular video. We'll save that for part 2. But let's look at the code now. So I'm going to go back to the notebook or the collab notebook. I'll be sharing, obviously, with you guys. But let's look at what we did. To essentially install the OpenAI agents, it's very simple. All you need to do is pip install OpenAI-agents, and you have the agent to work with. For this particular demo, I'll be using Colorama to essentially print the user's query as well as the response from the agent in different colors. That's why I've used. So you can ignore this. You obviously don't need this. OpenAI agent is the only library that we are using here, nothing else. All right. A few import statements to essentially set the project for us. Now let's look at the order agent. In fact, I'm actually going to start with let me go back here. I'm going to start with the classifier agent here. You can ignore the reservation agent text for now, but let's focus on the classifier agent. The classifier agent is a simple agent implementation. It essentially is a class that has a few parameters that we are passing. The parameter is obviously the name of the agent. It's a user interface agent. You can call it classifier agent. You can call it the triage agent, doesn't matter. The idea is that you give it a name so that you can essentially identify that, mostly in the tracing that you have written, right? The tracing capability is something that we'll also see. One of the parameters here is the model, and the argument is the name of the model. In this case, I'm using GPT-4o Mini. It could be a completely custom client that you want to use. If you're using this at office and you have a open source LLM that you're using, you can actually create a custom client and then essentially pass that. That is also possible. Instructions is basically you can say this is a prompt, and you're telling what that agent should do. You can also create custom prompt here, which has context, the meaning that I mean, you can create dynamic prompts here, right, which has context as well, just like you would in LangChain or other multi-agent frameworks that we've seen. In this case, the classifier agent, I'm asking it to essentially hand off the appropriate agent based, hand off to appropriate agent based on user query. What are the agents that I have? I have the order agent, FAQ agent, complaint agent, reservation agent. You see that I have not written anything specifically. It's a very simple statement, and it is doing a fantastic job of essentially handing it off. This is how you essentially, use the handoff parameter. Handoff parameter is essentially it takes the argument as a list of agents that you have created, right? And depending on the user query, the agent will essentially hand it off to a specialized agent. All right, so let's look at the order agent. It's a very simple implementation, guys. This is just to learn how to implement these agents. The complexity, could vary use case, could vary by use case and the kind of problems that you want to solve. But just to get us started with this particular framework, I have essentially written this particular code. Now let's talk about the order agent. Order agent is a simple implementation. It For the order agent, we're not doing any handoff at this point in time. We can do handoff as well. We can probably have two levels of, in fact, multiple levels of triages. But for this implementation, we're only passing, three arguments here. One is, we're using three parameters: name, obviously, instruction. I'm telling it, help customers with their order status. If they provide an order ID, fetch the status. And obviously, the agent needs a tool to work with, right? It needs to, essentially maybe talk to an orders API if you're doing a real implementation of this particular use case. But in this case, I've written a simple stub implementation here. I have a method called check order status, and I'm using the function underscore tool, which is basically a part of the agents framework here. Function tool, as you can see, I've imported that here. Function tool is essentially you're telling that the decorator essentially tells that this is basically a tool, and if you use that as an argument in the tools parameter, then for a specific agent, then it becomes the tool for that particular agent. So depending on the user query, it will basically call the relevant tool. And in this case, I'm using only one tool. You can have multiple tools that you can work with, but in this case, it's the check order status, as you can see. Check order status takes order ID as input, and it returns the relevant response. I've essentially created stub data. You can assume this to be an API or a database query if it's a real implementation, correct? All right, so let's look at FAQ agent. Very simple or very similar implementation to that of the order agent here. You'll see I have written multi-line instruction here because this is a little tricky, right? Because there are multiple keywords that it requires. I'm using a dictionary for it to return relevant response because FAQ could be a lot of things. So what I'm asking it to do is I wanted to essentially answer common customer questions, but augment the answer based on the tone and details requested in the query, and also pick up the relevant keyword from the user's query and pass that as input. The docstring also does a good job of explaining what it does, what the method does, but I've been a little explicit in the instruction here, and I'm using the answer FAQ as a tool. Again, this could be a database call, this could be an API call, it could be anything. And we will simply, this particular agent, the FAQ agent, will simply call that particular tool and return the relevant response. Simple implementation, right? The third agent is a complaint handler agent. Again, very simple implementation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But let's look at the reservation agent now. Reservation agent does something similar. It has the agent is taking the agent class here. We're passing arguments to three parameters: name, instruction, and tool. We've written a custom tool called handle reservation that, depending on the query, returns a relevant response. Now, what is important here is you will see that the input here is very, very unique, meaning that the input needs to be one of the one of the keys here: make, modify, cancel, availability. The LLM does a good job of identifying that particular keyword depending on the user's query. All right, so let me actually run the agent again, and we'll see how that is working. Yeah, before we do that, I also want to show you how we are running this in chat mode. Essentially, we are using a while loop to continuously run this, and will only come out of the loop if the user keys in exit. So once the agent returns a response, we are immediately asking for the next input from the user. That's why we are running this continuously. But you'll also see that we are also retaining context. How are we doing that? We are essentially adding a response to input list. This is the way you can retain the context from the previous responses and add it as context to the input, and you're simply passing the same input to the runner. Runner is essentially the class that we'll use to run the agent. We're already running the agent, so I'm going to ask it something random. Let's see how this handles. All right, so I'm going to ask it to check the status of a order that doesn't exist, and let's see how it handles it. What is the status of order? Some random text, and let's see what it does. The order is ID was not found. Please check it and try again. Great. Let me test with something that that is already there. I'm sorry. So I have an order number 11 or 11121. I'll only pass 11121. Let's see if the context is actually working, if it is able to understand that I'm actually passing an order number. All right, it was. Your order number 11121 is still being processed. Please wait a little longer. Let's see if that is the actual message. Your order number is still being processed. As you can see, that's the actual message. Great. So the context is working. It is able to, identify that I'm actually passing an order number, right? I wanted to, let's essentially ask it something that is outside of the FAQ, okay? In fact, let's start with something that is present in FAQ, but let's twist the query, right? So we know that this restaurant is open from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Let's see if it can handle a question, a random question, and uses the data from the tool and is able to answer it appropriately. So I'm going to ask it, are you open at 9 a.m.? No, we open at 10 a.m. Great. Now, let me go back to FAQ. Let me try and make up something. All right, so I'm going to ask it, are you guys present in London as well? I'm hoping that it identifies this to be a FAQ type question. No, I mean, in fact, yes, we are currently located at 123 Main Street. London isn't one of our locations yet. Awesome. It's doing a very good job of identifying random natural language queries and identifying the right intent and answering appropriately. This is awesome. Let's look at one more example and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, let me make a regular reservation. I'm going to ask it something that I had given previously. Do you remember the time of reservation? Let's see if it's able to do that. Yes, your reservation is for 2 p.m. today. Great. Cancel it. And sorry, guys. Your reservation has been canceled. We hope to see you another time. Awesome. All right, guys, that's it. This is part one of the OpenAI Agents SDK tutorial. We'll talk about the context as well as guardrails in part two of this particular series. I still believe this is probably one of the best frameworks. I was a big fan of Swarm. I continue to be a big fan of this particular framework. This is a very clean, simple implementation, as they are correctly calling out. This is a lightweight yet a powerful framework, and this is production ready. I'm super excited with what we can do with this particular framework. It's been a long time, guys, since I published a video. It's been almost 3 or 4 weeks. I was busy with a few things, but I hope that you like this particular video. If you like this video, please share it with your network, and we'll meet in part two of the OpenAI Agents SDK tutorial. Thank you so much.